What is up, guys? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Bearded Tog podcast. I just want to hop right into the exciting things we've got going on. First thing, you know this, pricing workshop to check the health of your business or to check what you need to go full time. Going to be really cool. We're going to break down pricing to where it's not a feeling thing. We're not going to go and look at our competitors or our heroes' websites and say, well, that's what they're charging, so that's what we'll charge, right? Because that's just stupid, right? We're not going to do that, all right? Sorry, this is not very positive. But the positive thing is there's a free workshop on pricing September 29th for free in the Bearded Tog Facebook group, togfb.com. It's going to be a freaking blast. You can come, bring your questions, bring your pricing. We're probably going to do a thing where you can submit your pricing and we can kind of talk about it. That's one of the things this year that I've worked with mentees on is uncomplicating their pricing and letting them know, just like you have a why in your brand, why are you charging this much? And it has been really revolutionary for them. A lot of them have been texting me their wins and they're booking their top packages, their highest packages. It's been really, really, really fun. So September 29th, 7 p.m. EST, togfb.com. Would love to have you in the free Facebook group. Seriously, do not miss this as we go into booking season this year. Okay? You need to have your ish down. We're in a pandemic. You need to be ready with the money, honey. All right? So, sorry for preaching. Second thing, if you missed our workshop with this guest, Sam Jacobson, you can go to that same link, togfb.com, or in the show notes, and watch the epic 2+ hour workshop where Sam talking about everything photographers do wrong in the sales process. So it'll be good, supplementary, complimentary content to what you're about to listen to right now. Would encourage you, if you are not driving, to put a note in your phone to watch that, make an appointment, put your phone down after, and just dive in. Sam has helped my business. Sam has helped every photographer you've ever heard of. He's helped in some way. He's absolutely incredible. He sold over $50 million in bookings. So unless you're at that level, you need to watch it. So, and all that to say, Sam is here on the podcast. So Sam's going to kind of walk through what photographers and wedding vendors get wrong about pricing and sales, kind of giving his data-driven, science-based approach, all his research that he's curated and his experience selling to kind of make it not feel salesy, to kind of make it feel, again, more of a data-driven decision, right? So we can kind of rest in the rules. And I love that approach. I went to his workshop in February. I was not sure what I was going to get out of it, and I came home with like 30 to-do items. I spent, a decent amount of money on going to this workshop. Probably the most expensive workshop I've ever gone to, between the workshop and the, travel, lodging, all that kind of stuff. And it was so worth it. So guys, without any further ado, here's Sam Jacobson of ID Action Consulting. So Sam, so good to finally have you on the podcast. I've known about you for a few years through different other educators, other podcasts, and your content. It just has this creepy way of showing up because it's so good. It's one of those things that like eventually you just can't stop seeing it around, and it makes sense. And I feel like for me, it just aligns with what I want to do better. And so then I decided to take your workshop in February. That's when we got to meet in person, and I'm just setting the stage for everybody. I've been in business for, a few years. We've hit the 6-figure mark. We've hit the, 35 wedding a year mark, the 40, whatever we want to do. We've been published. Like, we've hit some basic goals, nothing too crazy. We're not photographing, Martha Stewart herself or anything like that, but we're doing okay. But I wanted to come to iron out the sales process. And there's no wedding industry educator, I feel like, that has a background in sales that talks about sales. There's so many wedding educators that are like, well, yeah, I did okay at business. Here's how I did it. But everything I loved about what you have to say is so data driven. And so you've curated all the books that you read, and we just get to reap the benefits of that. So with all that saying, thank you for coming on. It's an absolute honor. I'm so thankful we made this work, man.
Yeah, Adam, I'm glad to be here. And I got to tell you, we've had, a few people attend our workshop, obviously, but your interest in it actually stands out. And I don't know if you remember this, but when you hit me up over DM on Instagram, to ask some more questions about it. I remember you said something to the effect of, I've been in the game for a little while. I'm actually pretty successful.
Yeah.
My conversion rates are probably a little bit off, but I feel like I'm making pretty good money.
Yeah.
What are you possibly going to show me that I don't know or am not doing very well right now? And I was like, I remember I was cooking dinner and I was like, hey, Katie, babe, check out this guy. This guy just threw a challenge down. And I am excited to show him all of the amazing things that he has not yet learned. And I'm glad that, 6 weeks later or whatever it was, you were like, okay, that was good. That was a good lesson.
Yeah.
I picked up on some things there. So I think it's great, man. I love that you laid down the challenge of teach me something I don't know rather than something that I do, which is what we see a lot of in the wedding industry. And a lot of it's based off, like you said, like, hey, this worked for me with my clients in my market at this time in the development of my business. And so I'm going to give you what I did, but I'm not going to teach you what you should do for your business, with your clients, with your market, with your skill set. And that's, I think, really the difference between what we teach and what other people do.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's something about this after being in the industry a while, and kind of that conversation was, hey, I don't need to go from 0 to 1. I'm trying to go from 7 to 8, or I'm trying to go from 9 to 10. And the market of education at that level is so small, at least to the wedding professionals, right? And like, if you want to learn how to edit, there's a bazillion workshops on that and bazillion courses. But a 3.5 day, intense 8-person workshop, all about, sales, data, copy, contact forms, everything, just it didn't exist. And until now. And I feel like, and I was like, okay, yeah, we have to pursue this and try this. And it really helps. I think one of the big things for me, and we're recording this prior to a workshop, this will come out after the workshop we do together. But it's, for me, there were some things that I feel like photographers just don't know that maybe a caterer or a venue person know, and we'll get into some of your background, but photographers need to know, what should my conversion rate be in the normal wedding market? What does it look like? What even is a conversion rate? Should I be tracking that? And I feel like for me in the last few years, I got addicted to the data, but it really helped me level up my decision making. Even something as simple as like, where do all your referrals come from? How should you treat the ones that give you the most? So that was really, really cool. So I want to know, all that to say, what's your background? Other than I said you're an avid reader, which you are. What's your background in sales, in the wedding industry, or just sales in general?
I like to joke that my sales career got started when I was about 6 years old, selling Kool-Aid on the street corner in Northeast Portland. And that's probably true, because even back then, even though it was just lemonade or Kool-Aid or whatever it was, I always had this entrepreneurial approach to conducting business and selling. And so I wasn't satisfied with like the regular, Kool-Aid or lemonade stand. My parents never helped me. It was just me. And when I found success there, I was already challenging myself to do more. So I was like, we're going to do some add-ons here. Let's cook up some Rice Krispie treats. So we took the profits from, first day of Kool-Aid stand, and then ran down to the local 5 and dime, market, and bought a bunch of Rice Krispies and marshmallows and cooked those up. And then when we sold those, we took the profits from those and we bought a bunch of, at the time, Garbage Pail Kids and baseball cards were the hot thing. So we bought boxes of baseball cards and Garbage Pail Kids, and then we repackaged them and sold those. And this is my little brain working at 6, 7, 8 years old. Yeah. And I just never stopped. When I was 16, 17, I started waiting tables. Doing room service first, and then waiting tables. I worked for 3 years at the Olive Garden as a salesperson, as a server. Yeah. Which I found was a great opportunity for me to really practice some of my persuasion skills. I wouldn't just wait the tables. I would go in with like, I'm going to sell 2/3 of my customers the tour of Italy. 1/6 are going to get the lobster spaghetti, and then like the rest I don't care about. And so I would challenge myself even at that younger age. But importantly, I did get my actual wedding sales chops selling weddings, not just selling unlimited soup, salad, and breadsticks or Kool-Aid. And I worked in the restaurant industry for about 5 or 6 years. And then I started selling weddings in 2006. My boss at the resort that I worked at up in Washington State, where I'm at now in the San Juan Islands, he came over one day and said, "Hey, guess what? The event manager quit to go and take care of a sick parent. And so we need you to come over and work with weddings." And I was like, "Great. When do I start?" And he says, "In about 30 minutes, you've got a meeting with some people who are getting married tomorrow. Wow. And you need to run their rehearsal ceremony." And so I ran over from my office in the restaurant and quickly read as much as I could of Emily Post's Wedding Etiquette on how to conduct a ceremony.
Sure.
And I was off to the races, and I loved it immediately. I wasn't great at it. Like I was at selling the tour of Italy at the Olive Garden. It took some time for me to learn about wedding couples and to learn about sales and persuasion in general, and fine tune and hone it. But after 8 years of selling directly, I was kind of at the top of my game and looked for a big challenge in a different area, and moved out to Dallas. I worked with Todd Fiskus with his company, Todd Events, and directed operations there for a couple of years before I decided I needed an even bigger challenge, which was to have more bosses and more problems to solve by working with wedding pros directly as a consultant and coach.
Yeah, dude, that is insane. I knew a little bit of that story, but hearing kind of all that connected, and I think too, what people don't realize, like selling weddings, at a venue or something like that, like, for a long time, you get the data. It's not just, I had this conversation with a wedding photographer on a last podcast where so often we are prone to try something once or twice, and if it doesn't work or doesn't go well, we just give up and stick to our way. Whereas for you, I keep saying that the data-driven kind of mindset is like, you have years of data, and you can say, guys, like this, there are going to be outliers. There are going to be people that, have a shorter contact form, a longer contact form, do this sales process, that way. But here is what the majority, the medium, the grande, between the tall and the venti, the majority of the human beings, at least in the US, are going to go with based on their psychology. And I love too, the one thing I think people think about is like, when photographers hear sales, we all think sleazy. Like we get this, like, maybe it's not a high horse, but maybe it's like, we don't want to sell. One of the notes I wrote was like, photographers want to just show their work and be like, hey, it's pretty. I hope you like it. And if you like it, then why would you pick anybody else? Like, that's how we should do it. But the reality is that, that's not the case either. So I want to ask you, first off, you've taught tons of wedding pros, and I don't know how many specific photographers, but a lot. I know for a fact. It's like, I want to know, what's the number one thing you see? I mean, there are a lot of things. We'll talk about them, but what's the number one thing you see that photographers suck at when it comes to the sales process?
I'm going to laugh out loud because I was trying not to laugh while you were talking, Adam, because I've learned to be a good podcast guest. You don't interrupt the person with like active listening skills. Yeah. Like I'm tracking, but I couldn't hold that one in. What's the one thing that photographers really suck at? I think you're onto something with, here's my work, here's my contact form, here's how much it costs, book me if you want. And that's really, it's kind of one of two different selling styles. So one of the ways that people commonly sell is through information. Here's all the information, read it over, make a decision, and hopefully it'll be me. And another way that people often sell is through their work. Here's my product. Here's my design, or here's my images, or here's my film that I made. And if you like it, I can do that for you too. And those can be successful if you find the right person to buy that way. But as you know, there are different types of buyers. And our job as a salesperson is to stretch our communication approach to meet them where they're at as the client. And so that's a challenging thing for people to do. And to kind of tie in with what you were talking about, how a lot of other educators in the wedding industry teach or train or coach, mentor, whatever you want to use the word, is that they show people what worked for them with their style, with their buyers. And so if you go through and you look at 3 or 4 different selling styles with 3 or 4 different buying styles, all of a sudden you recognize that there are lots of permutations that could exist. And so it's important for every photographer or any wedding pro, any salesperson who's trying to pitch your wares to at least self-identify what your inclinations are, recognize that most people that are buying from you are probably saying yes because it's comfortable for them. And that's a good place to start. But if you really want to achieve success, you've got to be able to mix it up and also connect with people who are buying in different ways than you're selling.
Something you said there was kind of even just a light bulb for me there, because we'll talk about the buyer types and kind of the selling process. But yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like, I think you might not be a good salesman if you're only selling to people who are already comfortable with you. Is that right? And I think is the process of getting better, being able to sell to, more people. Is that the idea? Are there people out there that are potential buyers for you and it's just not clicking?
Yes, that's exactly it. And if you go through and you look at the people who are your favorite clients, they probably look a lot like you. They probably talk the same way or like to talk a lot. They like to have fun or not, maybe they're quieter, introverted types. Maybe for them, beauty is and the way things look is really what's important. And that's what your brand represents. So, you're putting out what's important to you and what you value as most people in the wedding industry do. And so therefore you're attracting people who are like you. And so that's the easy way. But the question is, are those the buyers that are going to become your clients that will reach the kind of levels of success that you're hoping for in your business?
Yeah.
And one of the real challenges that I feel that I see over and over again in the wedding industry, and especially with photographers, is that I kind of see there's really 3 types of photographers that I see. One is the gearhead, who is interested in the technical nature of photography and kind of geeks out over that. The second type is the relator, who wants to connect with and either provide an experience that they themselves did not have when they got married with their photographer, or maybe they want to help and guide people to a great experience that they didn't get or that they would want to see, or maybe pictures and photographs were a big part of their relationships with their family, and that holds a special value to them, and they want to provide that service to another. And then the third type is kind of this, this influencer type that really wants to put out, beautiful images and attract people with the quality of their work. Mm-hmm. And that's really the highest importance to them. And so what we see then is that those 3 types of photographers are out there pitching their wares. And so one sales approach works for one type and a different works for another and a third works for another. And I think the key is to make sure that you recognize that what you yourself are inclined to do, and also recognize that you are going to run into all sorts of people who are attracted to different things. And so your job is not to not be who you are, but instead to showcase different sides of who you are. Because as a photographer, you love relating to people, you love the technical work of your job, and you also love the art that you create. And so the key to sales success really is to find out what are the needs and the interests of the people that you're working with, the potential client, and then focus the conversation on that aspect of what it is that you do rather than what you may love most yourself.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I feel like one of the things that I took away from the workshop that was really good for me, and I think as we, at the beginning of the year, prior to everything going on during these stressful times.
The world melting away.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the events world, right? Our plan was to bring on a few additional photographers because, we had this data, right, where we're getting, 500 leads a year, and I was only aiming, only taking 30 to 35 weddings per year. So as we found out, low conversion rate, but there was room for growth in there. There were either clients that we turned down or because of date or budget, and it's like, okay, let's figure that out. But one of the things that for me after the workshop and even now in my mentees, I kind of clue them in and I don't explain the whole process, but I just help them with is, I'm not sure if this is your term or from a book, but the micro commitments. That was a revolutionary thing for me. And what happens is, and there's so many different flavors of this, but the biggest example I feel like for wedding photographers is we get that email and they fill out our form. And we haven't even talked about contact forms yet, but they fill out that form, and as short or as long as it is, they send us an email, and it usually varies, right? We get sometimes people email us and they love us. They've been a huge fan for years. They're very excited. It's great. Or maybe they called us out in an Instagram DM and now they're signing up for a workshop. And then we get those emails that are, hey, this is where we're getting married. What are your prices? Whatever. We've all been there. And so many photographers I know, and I forget what popularized this, but so many photographers I know, they just drop a PDF or a link, or like their immediate response is this ginormous thing of information. And it's not that information is bad, and it's not that information isn't useful, but it very much, so the way you presented it to me was like, this is like asking what your kids are going to look like on the first date. This is a huge thing. They just want to know a little bit about it. So as much as you feel comfortable, tell me a little bit about that micro commitments process. I mean, that's one example. I'm not even at the beginning of it, but how does that work? And why do photographers suck at that too?
Well, it's interesting. I think that I don't know where it started either. This idea of just like information dumping on the first opportunity. I think it's probably one of two reasons, or it could be a combination of both of them. I don't know if you remember this old school cartoon where there's this big bulldog and then this little chihuahua, and the bulldog is Spike, and the chihuahua, I don't even know the chihuahua's name, but the chihuahua's like jumping around. It's like, hey, Spike, want to play, Spike? Want to play? Let's play, Spike. What do you want to do, Spike? Let's go over here, Spike. Like, you get so excited about the opportunity to do something with somebody that you're just like, woohoo, I got an inquiry. Here's all the stuff that I have for you. And that's just a natural response that we have when we're excited about something. It's like, oh boy, somebody's in the store. I'm just going to go up to them and talk their ear off. So that's one response, I think. The other is that it's easy and convenient to create automations and to just put together all the information when you're slow in January, so that when you're busy in, September or October, now everything's automated. So you just at the push of a button, you have it go into play and into practice. And so you send the big PDF that you spent your winter creating, or you get the email templates that you've got dialed in and you then send them out. And so it's easy and convenient for you when you're busy, or maybe you just don't like selling and so you don't feel comfortable getting on the phone and walking people through would probably be a third reason why people do that. So the concept of doing that, you could do that if you want, but I say as a general rule, if it's easy and convenient for you, it's probably not going to be optimal for the buyer's experience. And that's really what we want to do. Going back to something you said earlier about photographers, or really any wedding professionals, when they think of sales, they think of sleazy or coming off as like this like kind of scammy, scuzzy feeling. And what I usually think of when I think about a sales process is I try and flip it around to a buying experience. And so I'm not selling somebody something. What I'm doing is I'm helping them buy something that they want or need. Whether they know it or not, that's up in the air. And that's really what we want to do in the beginning of the buyer's journey, is help them identify what their needs are. And so when you respond to somebody who's like, are you available and how much does it cost? And you're like, there's all the information you could ever need to make a decision. Let me know. And what ends up happening is that this person can't sort through all of the stuff because they don't even know what to look for yet. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know what they don't know. And you haven't done anything to help them ask the right question. So the concept of micro commitments is, and I don't remember where I got it or if somehow it came up, and I just kind of put this in there. And this image that I have is really these like small little baby steps that you're moving along the way. And the goal of all sales work that you do is to create this, what's called deal momentum, where you want to create momentum for the deal to progress forward. And your job is not to close the deal the first time that you hear from somebody. It's to get to the next stage in the decision-making process from the buyer's perspective. and you're going to go through the same type of process every time. It may move slower or faster depending on who you're working with. And so you can move through mini commitments, micro commitments at a rapid pace, or it could take months to go through. But you're going to run through roughly the same sequence, because this is how we know through science and research how people buy. And with regards to wedding photography or any type of photography or any type of wedding services, what we're really talking about is a complex sale. And it's not a simple transaction. So a simple transaction would be, hey, I've got this t-shirt, I'd like to buy it. And then somebody brings you up at the cash register and you then go away. That's somebody who is probably the only person making the decision. They know exactly what they want and need. There's really low risk on making the t-shirt decision, as we all know, because we have t-shirts hanging in our closet we haven't worn in months. So if you don't like it, it's really not that big of a deal. There's not a lot of money that's involved in it, probably under $30, right? So there's not a lot of thought that goes into that from the buyer. But for a complex transaction like wedding photography, you're looking at multiple stakeholders, right? At least two people involved, if not parents and friends and anybody else who might be involved. You've got huge dollar amounts, could be $10+ $1,000, depending on what segment of the industry you're in. You've also got a long period of time between when you get engaged and you need wedding photography for your wedding and when you actually make the decision. It could be 6-9 months before you make a decision, after you know that you need something or somebody. And then the fourth criteria, which is risk, is huge. If you get a photographer who sucks or screws up or doesn't do what needs to be done, you don't get a do-over with your wedding. And so there's enormous risk in choosing the wrong person to provide these services. And so because you've got these four criteria, risk and time and multiple stakeholders and a lot of money involved, you have to sell to people differently because they're instinctively buying differently. And that's where micro commitments come in. You walk them through that complex process because they've never done it before, but you have. And so you got to guide them along with those baby steps.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole, everything you just said is like, all of that is how your clients feel when you send them that PDF. And we don't want them to feel that way, up front. Like, it's their first time doing this. They've never done this before. Usually they have only had maybe whispers of insights from friends or the knot or whatever. Or the funniest thing for me and my brand, and I didn't even realize this until a few years ago, was, I was in the community that was like, photographers hate Pinterest or they hate getting Pinterest boards for a time because we're artists and we're great. But the reality was, what I realized, most of my couples have never even used Pinterest. They've never even been to the knot. And so when it came to selling on my end, I had to ask a lot of those, I had to present a lot of those questions that, are maybe on that silly knot list that, I hate hearing from, but in my own way, and tell them how I was going to solve that. I think one of the best things I'm good at on the phone call is that minimizing risk, because we've been doing this for a long time. We've shot 200 weddings or whatever. We have multiple team members, all these kinds of things. And, but again, it's like photographers miss that. They miss that chance to sell and present, I think. Even if you weren't good at sales or you didn't think you were good at sales, like, at least in my mind, hopping on the phone for 20 minutes and like, hey, this photographer sounded like they were the nicest ones, or this is the person that you're going to spend your 10 hours with, 12 hours with, that's one of my big selling points. I feel like is like, guys, we're going to be together for the whole day. Like, what is this person like in front of your parents, and using that kind of as a strategy for all of that. So I want to talk about the next commitment, just for fun while everybody's listening. So they're like, okay, I shouldn't do a PDF or I shouldn't send just my pricing guide immediately. And we won't sell the farm here, but one of those things that I feel like I've taught my mentees even after your workshop is when you finally do get to packages. And one of the biggest things I heard about you before the workshop was this idea of like flexible packages or flexible pricing or flex pricing. And when I heard it, I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I was like, and it came, and we both agree on where it came from, in the sense of like, because that was one thing we talked about. And you basically said, Adam, if you want to do the same thing for the next 10 years, yeah, you can do it, but you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of money, because I had low conversion rate, but I was still making all these phone calls. I wasn't selling to anybody, I was drained even though I was already booked. And the reality was, Adam, like, if you were going to shoot a wedding in February on a Thursday, like, don't you want it? What else are you doing? How are your profit margins that bad that you can't take it? Which the answer should be no, for all of us listening. So I think the idea of the flexible pricing was, apprehensive to me, but I want to talk about, packages. So we finally get to pricing, right? This whole episode is just what do photographers get wrong about these things, but it's a good theme. It's a really good theme.
Welcome to my world. Welcome to my world, because that's really where you start from, and that's what we've done as a business. We started doing just consulting and coaching for me, and now we do all sorts of other things, including website reviews and copywriting and proposal creation and these things, because we hear what the problems are that photographers and planners and floral designers are experiencing, and we like you as photographers are trying to develop solutions to the problems that our clients are facing. And that, just to kind of dive into the packages, that's what you're doing with custom packages and custom pricing, is that you aren't selling what you want to sell. You are providing a solution for the problems, issues, concerns that your buyers have.
Yeah.
And so you've got to find out what those are and then offer a tailored, perfect solution, or three of them, which if you want to optimize things. And that's the ideal way to go.
I want to ask, this is probably what every photographer is in their car wondering, like, when we say, one of the phrases you say a lot that I love is, finding out their needs and wants that they have. But from the photographer's perspective, and this is very plain Jane, but I think this is what a lot think, don't they want the same thing? Which I know sounds stupid, but it feels like couples want the same thing at face value. So do photographers struggle with just asking the same questions to different couples and feeling like it's the same? Or also, how can we, what should we be finding out as far as needs go? Like, don't they know that they, basically want a photographer there? They want to shoot, everything they want to shoot, and they hopefully want to get photos that aren't watermarked and that they can use to have fun, So like, what is that? Clear that up for me. That kind of, how do we find out those needs and wants? And then what are a couples? I couldn't even tell you, like, other than I can answer the personal side. Like, most of my couples want to not feel like photography is a chore, or they don't want it to feel like, they don't. My couples are cocktail couples. They want to go to cocktail hours. So I'm like, okay, we'll do XYZ because of this. But other needs that the average couple might want, I couldn't answer, or it is too simple, right? Am I overcomplicating this?
No, I don't think you're overcomplicating it, but it's hard sometimes. Like, if you ask a chef what makes a good recipe, it's not going to be a ton of ingredients. It's going to be something really simple. But to get to the simplicity of it, you've got to go through iteration after iteration after iteration. You've got to really dig down to figure out what the core, the essence of that thing is. And that's really when I talk about trying to identify what the needs are of your couples, of your clients, of your buyers. What you're trying to do is really get at what is driving their decision psychologically, emotionally. And when we talk about making an emotionally based decision, that's really what we're talking about. Not emotional in the sense of irrational, but emotional in that they're making it with their heart and maybe not with their head. So I don't know, I'll just make something up as an example. We talk about a solution that many photographers provide is the number of hours of coverage that they're going to give. Okay. Now, what we find out during a properly conducted discovery call on the phone is that the couple does not want to be rushed. That's a big deal, because they don't want to feel stressed on the wedding day, because they want to either enjoy the time that they're having, or they want to look back on photos and not see the 11s in their eyes because they're pissed that this is taking so long. I know this from personal experience. I actually drew a finger across my throat geared at the photographer at my own first wedding, because I was like, we are not taking another photograph of my now wife going through the buffet line getting food. Like, we've done 20 of them. We're good. Everybody wants to eat. If you do this again, you're fired on the spot. So that type of thing is what's going through somebody's head is, I don't want to waste time, or I don't want to feel pressured to get all of the stuff done. And so when you're looking at the solution, the services, the number of hours of coverage, it can't just be what you think or your average, say 8. If you feel like this couple needs more time for any number of reasons, then you've got to add more time into the solution that you're offering them. Or let's say another one, a common one that photographers run into, and we do copywriting. So, we've worked with, 20 photographers across the country. And probably the most common thing that we find out that their buyers are concerned about, because we actually ask their buyers, what was your biggest concern before you booked the photographer? It's almost always, I don't want to feel awkward or uncomfortable in front of the camera, right?
Yeah.
So that's the concern. So what's the solution? Making them feel comfortable. How do you do that? It could be more time. It could be practice sessions. It could be sharing the prompts that you use. It could be a testimonial from a past client that says how great and easy you were to work with. It could be any number of things that you're going to do, but what you're quote unquote selling them is a solution to their concern about feeling awkward and uncomfortable in front of the camera. So that's what you want to gear most of your conversation towards.
That makes a lot more sense. I think it's one of those things where, again, we go back to the first thing we talked about with photographers. We want to say, yeah, I offer this thing. Do you want it? Versus like, no, this is why we might do an engagement session, or this is why we might add more time or suggest more time. Something I always say on my phone calls, which is either hurting me or helping me, I don't know, but I always joke with them and say, I'm more of a pragmatist than a salesman. I'll say, guys, like, I'm not going to sell you more hours if you don't need more hours, but like if you said, if your values are not feeling rushed, if your values are not feeling awkward in front of the camera, sometimes time, engagement sessions help. Sometimes doing a first look where you don't have to see your partner in front of everybody for the first time, that can help too, and it's a paradigm shift for a lot of photographers, a lot of couples, and even myself. It was like, you have to find out, like you mentioned, what are they stressed out about? What's their biggest fear when it comes to this thing, and I'm curious, like, we'll have to get a florist on here someday and be like, what are the fears that people have when they're buying flowers? What's the agitation there?
Well, so I worked with Todd Events, right? We sold, we sold millions of dollars in flowers every year. And typically, honestly, what you're looking with there is like that type of buyer is really interested in beauty and is really interested in showcasing their sense of style and what's beautiful to them. They want their friends and family to see what that is. And so as you go through as a floral designer, like that's what you're going to start with, is something that's related to aesthetics. And so you're going to dig into those types of questions. Your floral client, they don't care at all if they're your best friend. Like that's not important at all, right? Like what they want to know is how well you're going to reflect their sense of style and beauty to showcase that to everybody else. Yeah. And as a photographer, if you were on a phone call or a face-to-face with a potential client and they mentioned in passing how they have like, oh, we're going overboard on the flowers, like ding, 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 that should be a trigger for you. Oh, beauty, style, status, all of that's important. I'm going to steer the conversation to dig in and try and uncover what's really driving that. What's the emotion that's driving that? And then I know as a photographer, that's what I'm going to want to sell. So like if I found out that my potential photography client was spending boatloads of money on flowers, I would immediately assume, and I would probe and try out some questions to identify for sure that this person, this couple, is really interested in style, status, beauty. They're probably interested in experiences shared with other people. And because I just know this about this type of buyer. And so because of that, I'm going to stay away from technical analytical data, and I'm going to instead focus on things like how I'm going to create moments that they're going to be able to share with their family, how they're going to look back on these and relive the experiences. I'm going to focus on fast turnaround time, because what's worse than having your wedding but then not getting your photos for 3 months? Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the sneak peeks that I offer the next day. I'm gonna talk about the engagement session, not as a way to practice, because those people probably feel comfortable, but instead the engagement session is going to be a way that they can show their love and their lifestyle and what the affection they feel with each other on social media before the wedding. So I'm not even talking about the same things that I might talk about with somebody else who doesn't have a big floral budget, because I know these things.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. It's one of the things where, you see photography contact forms, and the last message part, we've made it very pretty, and we're like, tell me about your wedding, or what are you most excited about for your wedding? And I feel like a lot of photographers, we did that only for personal reasons. We're like, okay, but what you don't realize is that you do get data from that, and the couple, if they do fill it out, they are going to tell you, we're so excited for the flowers, or we're so excited to drink and party, or we're so excited for this, and I didn't realize until your workshop that it was like, oh, I can use this data, and at least for me, it's like, most likely they, depending on the referral source, they already like me a little bit. So I'm like, okay, let me really dig in on this particular part and spoil that particular need or want they have. And it's worked out really, really well versus just writing that off, essentially, and just be like, oh yeah, like they think I'm a really nice person, which, you can be, but it's like, no, use what they're giving you to do this. That was one of the things that I loved as well was, I've experienced these phone calls, these buyer types that we've talked about. And I used to have a very personable discovery call, right? The first call after the first email is kind of, what you call the discovery call. Some people call it consultation, whatever. And so I used to have a very long one. It'd be like 45 minutes, an hour, going deep. I think we even joked about these questions I would ask couples. And you were like, Adam, I'm leaving the meeting. I'm never answering those questions for you.
I did. I was like, I'm checked out.
Yeah.
Sorry, bro. I don't want to share how we met. I don't want to tell you why I love her.
Right. Yeah. Because these were like deep questions. And on some couples, and I didn't realize this, on some couples, they would cry. And it was an amazing experience. And they felt like, oh, Adam really wanted to get us to know us. And then, yeah, they would book, my package too. And it was a great day. And everybody lived happily ever after. But I never realized why these other couples didn't resonate with that. Or, I just thought, these jerks aren't as emotionally in touch with their feelings as, these other couples, which could be true. But at the same time, it's like, bro, you're still just a vendor until they book, until they have some you're still just a vendor, and they have no clue who you are, and this is not what they expected to talk about unless you help prime them. And so one of the things, I keep saying one of the things, but there are lots of things, but the idea of, and again, this should just be obvious to photographers, was that some of those people I was having that phone call with were different buyer types, simple as that. And I didn't realize that, there after the workshop, I was like, okay, I know one or two that I'm going to say I could probably convert every time if they practically have the budget. And then there were two others where I was like, I have to change. I have to relate differently, as we talked about earlier. And that plus the, because you feel all these things, but you never, we think couples are the same oftentimes, the buyer types, and then the different stages of where people are at in the buyer's journey, in the buying process. Like, we've had those phone calls where they're ready to book that night. You get the email and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. And then you have those other couples that 5 weeks, 6 weeks later, they finally made a GD decision, and it's you. Hopefully, hopefully they don't let you know after 6 weeks that it wasn't you. But it's this crazy thing. So tell me a little bit about, you can pick either or, the stages of where the buyer's at or the buyer types, and what can photographers kind of glean from, we'll say the contact form or from the discovery call to help inform who we're working with. Where are they at?
Yeah, and they kind of tie together. So let me see if I can answer that together. The concept of buyer types is something that I picked up from my own executive coach. I'm a naturally born and pretty talented salesperson, but I wasn't as good at my soft skills as I was at my sales skills. And so I hired an executive coach. Actually, the company that I was working for paid for it. But I found her, and I loved working with her. And the communication styles was really a breakthrough for me, and it was an identifier of why things were so challenging with my soft skills. And it was because I found out that different people are hardwired in different ways in their brain. And this is Enneagram, which is not as science-based as, say, the DISC assessment, which is probably the most research-backed approach to personality assessments. But you can go through and look at the DISC assessment, and you can find out that different people are wired different ways and have different ways of communicating. And they like to receive information, or they like to connect with people. They like to dream big, or maybe they want to see stuff get done. And so I took these concepts and then refined them over the years to identify different types of buyers that we see in the wedding industry, and then also buying signals that we can pay attention to during the discovery process. So we can help. We can help ourselves understand who are we working with, what are their natural inclinations, and how do I need to shift things up to be able to make them feel at ease and move the deal forward in a way that's most comfortable with, for them. So this is some pretty, basic stuff that, concepts, but really hard to master. And so one of the things that I recommend doing when in the discovery call is asking the right types of questions and really paying attention to how they talk rather than what they say. So that's one thing. Short way to remember, say a couple of key points would be, if somebody talks really quickly, they're probably going to want to move through the buying process really quickly. If they talk really slowly, they're probably going to need you to move the process slower. If they don't have an articulated, well thought out answer to the question, then you're probably going to have to pick up on that and articulate and guide them more heavy-handedly. Right. Whereas if somebody's like, this is exactly what I want and I just want to know the answer, then you're going to have to shorten up the amount that you share with them because they're just looking to fill in the blanks rather than write a whole concept of what it is that they're looking at. So when you can pick who it is that you're working with, you stretch their way of communicating and you're able to connect with them on a level that's most comfortable for them to see you as the right choice. The other early part of the discovery process is to ask the right questions to find out where are they at in the decision-making process. And you could ask them like, so where are you guys at in the decision-making process? But that's kind of like asking you, Adam, hey, how far along are you percentage-wise to achieving your lifelong earnings? You don't know because you don't know how much you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you can't answer that question. Or like somebody who's never been on a hike before and they don't know the mileage. They just know that they're on the hike and you're like, hey, how far along are you? I don't know. I don't know where I'm going. I've never been there before.
Right.
So what we want to do is we want to not trust whatever it is that they say because we can't believe it or they're just going to make stuff up. And so what we want to do is we want to be the evaluators of where they're at by just listening to how they talk about things and what information they share. And so my favorite go-to question, and here's anybody who's listening to this in their car or while editing or otherwise, is to ask this one question. Get me caught up to speed on where you're at with the whole wedding planning process.
Yeah.
Or some version. I'm a pretty casual guy. So I would ask something like that, which is basically, tell me what I should know that you've already accomplished.
Yeah.
And what I'm paying attention to is because I know that they got to go from A to Z. And if they tell me that they've done A, B, C, and D, then I know that I got to start with E. Or maybe they're at N and I got to start with now O. Yeah. Or maybe they're all the way at W and I just got to go, and so on. The other thing that I'm paying attention to is how they respond to that question. So are they going to respond with feelings, with people-driven content? Or are they going to respond with, here's a recitation of information that I have gathered since I started planning the wedding? Or are they going to tell me all the things that they got done and what they're going to do next? Or are they going to tell me about all the things that they hope and dream about their wedding? And so I'm listening and picking up on the clues of how they're explaining where they're at. And I'm feeding that into how I need to stretch my way of communicating and what I need to guide them through, knowing what I find out.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that too is still related to our micro commitments too, because, you have to know where you're taking them, where are they at, what do they feel comfortable, next step wise taking. And it's crucial to get that sense, I feel like, because one, for your own expectations, and then two, for how you can serve them better. Like if a couple wants an October wedding in 2021 right now, but they say, hey, you ask them, when are you looking to book a photographer? Is that going to be sooner or later? What's that look like for you guys? And they might say, hopefully with sometime in the next month. You might say, well, I want to let you know, on the East Coast, October weddings are, that's our most popular month, blah, 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 and obviously that date is still open, whatever, but it's like, you don't know unless you ask, of course. I think that's one of the crucial things. One of our last few questions, because I know, we want to keep you. We don't want to give it all away. We go watch his workshop in the Facebook.
Oh
group.
man, Adam, I could talk to you for like 19 hours.
I know.
It would be the tip. Think about the 3+ days that we spent together, and like we just scratched the surface, my friend.
Yeah, 100%.
This has taken me a lifetime to accumulate, and I'm still getting better at sales. I'm still reading books and learning new things. I'm still learning from my clients. Like, I'll give you an example, and then I'll let you get back to it. So one of the things that I found is actually the most important indicators of success in closing deals is to get both of the people who are getting married on the phone after they've seen the proposal. I had a client that I worked with, and she and I kept track of this information for a few months. And we looked at if she got one person on the phone for the discovery call, but couldn't get them on the phone for a second call after they've seen the proposal. We looked at those numbers, didn't book any of those people. So if they talked to just one person, but couldn't get them on a phone for a second phone call, nobody booked. If you had one person on the phone for the discovery call, sent them a proposal, and then did get them on the phone for the second call, 50-60% chance of booking. If you had one or two people on the phone for the discovery call, sent them a proposal, and then got both of the couples on the phone, 95% close rate.
Wow.
So what I learned, and this is since we did the workshop together with you at it in February, what I've learned since then is that one of the key activities that you can get good at is getting the second person who's getting married on the phone for the second phone call, because your conversion rates skyrocket.
Yeah.
So that now is a new skill that I'm trying to coach my long-term one-on-one clients, or if I'm doing a quick consultation, or when we get back to workshops, whenever that may be, that'll be a part of a skill development that people need to learn to be more successful.
Yeah, no, 100%. Even just that, I feel like the getting both people, on the phone, even for me on the discovery call, just from the feedback I've gotten from couples, at least, was that, it made them feel valuable. At least over here in DC, a lot of our couples aren't the kind of normal, complementarian, patriarchal, structures that they, once were. And I have grooms that want to be included, that are very excited, that are, taking charge of more than just the DJ, or whatever the traditions used to be. And they're excited to have both on the phone. And again, that goes back to one of my selling points. It's like, guys, we're going to be together for 10 hours. I should know both of you, or we should have some level of relation. We don't have to be best friends by any means. But we're going to be more than florists. That's our new Tears for Fears cover.
Well, think about it this way too, Adam. Like, in addition to making them feel valuable, the only thing worse than a photographer who doesn't want to sell or isn't good at selling is a bride that is interested in buying wedding photography. Like, the bride is not going to be able to sell her fiance on you as the right photographer. Yeah. And you don't want to trust selling your services to somebody else. You want to be the one who's selling them. So the best way to do that is to cut out the middleman, or in this case, the middle woman, and go directly to the groom to be. And now you guys get to have a conversation. He gets to hear you, connect with you, learn from you. He gets to create some objections that then you overcome. And all of a sudden that trust and value is built up, and he feels reassured. The risk goes down, the value proposition goes up. And that's not possible if somebody else is selling your stuff for you if they're not a trained salesperson.
Yeah, I think too, and you alluded to this, but that's why, and it can feel a little bit uncomfortable depending on where you're at locale-wise and what your couple looks like, as far as structure and family relationships. But you always ask, in your discovery calls of, who are some of the decision makers during this? Is it just you guys, or are some parents involved? And, whether budget, or in DC, I make a lobbying joke, or I'm like, are your parents lobbying for anything? And they, if the parents are involved, now you have to sell to them at some level, and it's one of those things where that's the perfect case is, do you trust this couple? Can you sell to this couple well enough that they can pass on your good name and say why you're worth it? If it's too much or whatever, that's a big thing. I want to ask, is there a difference for people listening who, there's photographers here who probably start at, $2,500, and there's photographers listening who start at $8,500. Is there a difference between their discovery calls? Is there a difference between the questions they might ask or the couple's values who have those different budgets? Coming from a luxury world,
Yeah, not much. And I work with photographers who sell services at $20,000 to $30,000.
Wow.
That's the exception. But I also spend most of my time working with photographers who are in the call it $3,000 to $6,000 range.
Yeah.
And the general sales process that I recommend and coach and train to in workshops is the same general process. The tactics within the process are going to be pretty much the same. The content, the what that is being said is going to be different. So if you go back and you think about the components of what's going to make a great sale, you've got what it is that you're selling, and you've got the how of selling that thing. And so the how is going to be roughly the same, and that's because we know how human beings buy these types of things. It's the same way that they make decisions on car purchases and home purchases and vacation purchases, anything that, again, has multiple stakeholders, huge amounts of risk, long time periods that go by, and high dollar amounts. So this is just how humans make decisions, psychologically speaking. So that part doesn't change. But what we know about the 2,500 versus the 8,500 is that, say the mass market or the mid-market client is more tuned into their fears and anxieties and concerns, their problems. While the luxury client at $8,500 is more turned into their wants and needs and desires. And so when we're going through, we need to touch on the problems for both parties, for the 2,500 and the 8,500. With the 8,500, we really need to arouse more desire in the purchase that they're going to receive. And so we're going to want to talk more about what they get in a positive sense to arouse that desire. Whereas with the $2,500 client, we're going to want to talk about the solutions to the problems that they have. So we may spend more time amplifying those problems, expanding on those problems, and then offering very specific solutions that the services that we offer in our packages will take care of.
No, that makes perfect sense as far as, kind of the mass market or that 2,500 is you are problem solving a bit, or they have problems in their mind, like you mentioned, that they are like, hey, we need these solved. How does this work? That kind of stuff. Whereas, again, luxury clients usually get on the call and everything's already handled, right? The planner has everything handled. They're ready to go. And you're like, well, how are we doing this? And they're like, oh, this is our answer. And you're like, oh, that's great. That sounds wonderful. It's like people don't realize, I think one of the biggest myths that I learned was I always thought the luxury clients would be the most high maintenance. And at least for me, anecdotally, it's the opposite. It is cruising USA at every one of those, any of my 5-digit weddings. It's they're a big fan of Adam. They're planned out a timeline according to, what we like to shoot, all that kind of stuff. They're ready to buy. They believe in everything, right? And that's one thing my last kind of motif I want to ask about was that when a client is quote unquote already bought into you and your brand, which, there maybe it's a mix of that influencer relator, photographer type we talked about. It never feels like selling. That's what I realized. And it's one of those things where going back to branding and everything, I talk to mentees about this is like, this is why you should have your brand down, because if you have this down and the copy and everything we talked about, like the first impressions of your site and, the blog posts and everything that's going to help guide them on the buyer's journey, by the time we get to the stage, it's not going to feel like, well, would you guys like to purchase an album? You know, it's not going to have that feel to it. And I think that is that kind of unlocked it for me. You know, it wasn't I was just trying to sell as a wedding vendor. Well, yeah, that'd be really challenging. But if I sell with this brand that I've already made, and most of my clients know more about me than I know about them by the time we're on the call, which is weird, but it's helpful. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's not a question.
No. But I got what you're putting down, and like to go to this, like it shouldn't be like a sale. Go back to your dating metaphor, which I love using dating metaphors, and you know this because I use them all the time in the workshop that you were at.
Yeah.
This idea of not getting married on the first date. Well, you shouldn't try and sell your bride to be on the fact that you want to kiss her. So like when Katie and I were dating, like I didn't lean in and be like, I'd like to kiss you now. Is that okay? Right? Like it just happened.
Sure.
It just felt right for both of us. And I'm sure that's that way with 99% of the people who end up kissing in the world's history, that they didn't ask permission first. And it didn't feel like they had to try and persuade or convince somebody. It was just the natural coming together that occurred after you felt comfortable that this was the next thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it is when you sell the way that people want to buy. It's just the natural progression of being able to help them meet their needs, which is why you exist. That's why you're offering a service for their needs. You're offering a solution to their problem. You are giving them something that you know that they need, that they find out while talking to you that they need. And so it's just natural to feel like that's the next step.
Right. No, 100%. That makes perfect sense. So I want to ask one fun question, just because we talked about your voracious reading appetite. And then I want to give you all the time in the world to, call to action. What are a few books that you would suggest photographers who are dipping their toe in to the sales process? They want to be better. Maybe they can't attend an in-person workshop yet, and we'll get to the other solutions we have for them on that end. But what are some books that people can really dive into that I think would help them in that sales process?
Yeah, so first and foremost, number one book that I recommend to anybody who's interested in becoming a better salesperson or just more persuasive in general is Influence by Robert Cialdini. It's spelled Cialdini. I don't know if you have show notes, but you can put those in there. So Influence was written by Robert Cialdini. He's a professor of psychology of sales. And he wrote this book, a couple of decades ago because he was so tired of his friends and family and colleagues getting swindled by marketers back in the 70s and 80s. So he decided as a social scientist to do a bunch of experiments to identify why it is that people are persuaded to do something. And he was thinking, I'm going to write this book. My understanding of this, at least, is he's thinking, I'm going to write this book as a warning to all of the people out there, and I'm going to create it for the mass market, for the consumer audience rather than the scholarly academic audience, so that they can have all of the understanding that they need to stay away from these salespeople and marketers. Well, some smart salespeople and marketers got the book and were like, boom, blueprint. This is everything we need to know to trigger people to be persuaded by whatever it is that we're trying to sell them. And so it's now easily one of the top 10, top 5 marketing and sales books of all time. And there are 6 principles of influence that Cialdini kind of identified through case studies. And over the last 10 or 15 years through fMRI imaging, they've been backed by, actual hard physical science. Wow. And so we know that these 6 principles are out there. I remember reading this book about 10 years ago, and it was a game changer for me. And because I was actively selling at the time, I was able to go through and to practice the theory in my day-to-day work. And I found out what worked for my buyers using these principles. And in large part, that feeds the types of things that I know are successful for the clients and workshop attendees and copywriting clients that we have.
Dude, that's amazing. Yeah, I have barely cracked into Influence, but I know it's going to be one of those books. It's one of those books where I feel like I'm not ready for it yet, but I am ready because it's when I went to your workshop, and I tell all my mentees this, is like, you're going to go to a workshop, or if you're going to take a course, if it's a big course or a big workshop, right? Like 3.5 days for the ideation one, be ready to change a lot. my to-do list after your workshop, after doing this job for as long as I have and hitting all those marks we talked about, I had 31 to-dos. And that was before I got Sarah's website review. So it was a lot, So, those website reviews they're intense. I love it. So, man, so good. Where can people go to find out more about you, to, pick your brain at some level, to hire you, to buy your time, that I think is super valuable? And I think one of my favorite resources, just to, cut it to the chase, is that you blog, I think, more than most photographers. Really good stuff. And I think it's both beautiful, probably like this podcast, and frustrating, because you'll read it and you'll be like, that's so good. And then you'll ask a question at the end or something like that, and you're like, damn it, I don't know the answer to that. You're very much on the, like, guys, these are things you should be thinking about. So where's the best place for people to go, and how can they get deeper into, Sam Jacobson, ID Action Consulting?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for that. And you're right. The blog is the best place to go. It's the first place to go. And you're also right. It's meant to not only solve problems, but also to cause problems. And that, like, I wouldn't be any good at what I did if I didn't practice what I preach, which is to help y'all identify what it is that you actually need. And so that's in many ways what the blog post does is, any good source of information, any good educator is going to get you to challenge your current beliefs and to reframe your understanding of whatever slice of the world they're trying to reframe. And so the blog is a great way to do that. You can just go to my website, or our website, idactionconsulting.com. Just plug it into Google, it'll come up. And if you want to sign up, idactionconsulting.com/free advice. That would be a great thing to put in the show notes. Yeah. It's just a link that takes you to the sign up page, or you can go to the website and scroll all the way to the bottom. And I put a ton of content out. I write, 1,000 to 1,500 word post every Tuesday morning. It goes out. There's about 3,000 people who are on the distribution list. And, it's a good weekly touch point to stay focused on, something that's related to sales and marketing. So that's a great place to start. I think going and kind of messing around on the website, get into the services page. We offer a ton of services. We offer, kind of the full spectrum of things that you need throughout the buyer's journey, from, websites, which, as you mentioned, we do website reviews. That's a great place for people to start. It's, a 310-point website evaluation. We provide a top 10 list of things you're doing and top 10 lists of things to improve with some direction on that. And we provide a 45 to 60-minute screen record of us going through your website with the evaluation, so you can see exactly what you need to change and keep that recording. So that's a great place for people to start. You can just sign up for those also on the website that we have. I think probably a really good place, given that everybody's existing virtually these days and our workshops are not in action right now, is this new ID Action community, which we started up at the end of May. We did 9 weeks of free group coaching. We had about 600 people all together.
Wow.
That we were kind of guiding through the COVID-19 outbreak back in March, April, and into May. And we had hundreds of people who were interested in what we were talking about and guiding them through. So we decided to continue on, but just offer a paid solution for it. So we have a small $99 sign up fee, and then it's $29 to $49 or $79 a month. And it includes not only 2 or 4 or 6 hours worth of group coaching or book club, but it also includes access to 50, 60 hours worth of group coaching sessions from the past. So if you wanted to learn more about buyer types, you get access to a 2-hour buyer type discussion where Katie, my business partner and wife, and I go through and dive deeply into buyer types. If you want to learn more about sales proposals, we have 4 2-hour videos on how to create custom sales proposals, right? If you want to learn how to close deals, we have 2 2-hour video segments on that. If you want to learn how to overcome objections, we have a 90-minute video just on how to overcome common objections, and so on. So that's a great place for people to start. Part of it, which I'm really excited about, is the book club. Like you asked, like, what's a good book?
Yeah.
A lot of people read a book, but they don't see it with the filter that I have on how to apply it to your business.
Sure.
And so we, at our $49 a month option, you get 2 hours of group coaching, including the Ask Me Anything. And then you get 2 hours of book club, where we talk about how you can practically apply what we read whether it's like a Malcolm Gladwell type book or influence. And then we go through and talk about how you can put that into practice with your business. And it's all very casual, and it's a great place for people to start. It's month to month. And as with all things that we offer, if you're not happy, we'll make it right. If we can't make it right, we'll give you your money back. Never had anybody ever ask for any money back.
Man, I love that. I love that. That's one thing you were talking about, the laid back group coaching. And I know we need to get off this call, but it's one of the things that the workshop felt like. It felt like, not to, degrade any of the experiences of this organization, but it felt like AA for bad wedding sales vendors, and it was like all of us there, we had people there who had 30,000, followers on Instagram. It felt like they're doing 5-digit weddings, and then we had people there who are still in that, 3 to 6 range. And, we were all there, and we were all broken, and we were all like, "Hey, fix these pieces."
And it's true. I mean, and I think this is really the thing. And this is why I always tell people, start off with the blog, because you're going to go through, and a lot of the content that we gear on the blog is aimed at 7 mistakes that you're making, or 4 things that you probably didn't know, or here's the single most important false belief that most wedding pros have, and we offer a reframing and then some solutions and some next steps. We don't just leave you hanging. But the real thing is that everybody has room for improvement. Mm-hmm. And to kind of bring it back full circle, even somebody who's wildly successful like you has opportunity to develop new skills entirely and to fine tune existing skills to get that last little bit out. And what I've found is that in the community that we do, the ID Action community, the online, it's a great place for people to have themselves hear that others are going through the same thing. Oh, you have that problem too. Mm. Oh, I'm not the only one. I thought I just sucked. And I think there's something, I don't know, there's something about that vulnerability. Mm. But more importantly, when we recognize, oh, okay, not only do I feel like I need help, but other people are admitting they need help. Now we become open to help, right? And that's like, you talk about AA for wedding pros, like that's the first step, is to admit that you have a problem. And that's the thing that I've learned. I was just talking with a journalist a couple of days ago, and he and I were kind of laughing. I was like, man, I offer a money back guarantee and a 10-to-1 return on my general pricing approach. When I do like long-term one-on-one coaching, I offer a 10-to-1 return with a money back guarantee on a 900% ROI, and still people don't want to take me. We offer payment plans. We offer lines of credit essentially to work with us if we need to. And still people don't want to do it. So that has more to do with, I don't want to admit that I don't know what I don't know. And that's that very first step that every photographer has to overcome. And if you can't, you're not going to achieve any kind of progress in any sizable or measurable way.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're holding yourself back. And could you get there someday? Maybe, but you are delaying, gratification, success, fulfillment, etc. So I love it. Sam, thank you so much for being on. Absolute pleasure. And I would encourage everybody to check out the show notes and go to idactionconsulting.com and just soak up everything that you have. You have a lot of good content. I feel like your next step is to have a podcast, but all your other stuff is basically very long form podcast type of stuff. So thanks so much, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Appreciate you, bud.
Man, was I right or was I right? Guys, like over an hour of Sam just given everything he freaking has. That guy can talk forever, but I think the important thing is that like sales and pricing are these things that feel really weird, but they don't have to. You got to learn the language, and once you do, you're going to have this comfortability going into wedding meetings, going into writing the copy on your site, going into being able to describe the packages that you have and finding out what couples really need so that you can still serve them and love them, but it won't be this kind of just relator thing where you're shooting in the dark. It's going to be a thing where you're going to know factually what they need and what solutions you have to help them. So really, really cool. This is probably a re-listenable podcast. Definitely go check out Sam's workshop, and we'll see you on the 29th, 7 p.m., togfb.com. Love this, guys. There's a link to Sam's workshop in the show notes too, so definitely go watch that. Have a wonderful day, guys. Keep being awesome.